Hello and welcome to the iCHIEFS podcast series, brought to you by the International Association of Fire Chiefs. This is where new ideas are born, leadership skills are discussed, and engaging topics are brought to the table. I'm Tom Jenkins, Fire Chief of the City of Rogers, Arkansas, and a past IAFC president.
And I'm Joe Powers, the Managing Director of IAFC's consulting firm, Emergency Services Consulting International. We're glad you're here. This podcast is designed for you and for the fire and emergency services community.
Before we dig into this week's important topic, make sure to check out our library of episodes at iafc.org/podcasts and listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you think the content is great,
good morning, good
go
evening,
ahead
and
share
welcome
it
to
with
the
your
iCHIEFS podcast. Since we've started including video in the series, I realize that many of your viewers are now seeing seasonal changes. I'm wearing long sleeves, a little bit of a Christmas tree in the background. So I hope everybody's having a great holiday season and looking forward to a new year. Unfortunately, Chief Rogers was unable to make it today, so I'll be winging it without our fearless leader, but I think he'll be proud. Today, I'm excited to introduce a longtime colleague and a friend to the show, Fire Chief Alec Oughton from the Aurora Fire Rescue in Colorado. Chief Oughton grew up in the Virginia Fire Service. After serving his time in the U.S. Navy, he retired as Fire Chief in the Henrico County Division of Fire before moving his family and career to Colorado. Welcome to the show, Alec.
Thank you, Joe.
So many of our listeners have worked through the ranks in their organizations, and they're looking for a change in maybe scenery, government structure, culture, you name it. What was it that led to your decision to leave, Virginia and move halfway across the country? And was it In-N-Out Burger? Was that really why you did it?
That was part of it. Yeah, for sure. I think a series of bad decisions in my life, is what led me to this. No, I honestly, the timing, you've heard the word serendipity, right? It was just a matter of alignment of a lot of things coming together. I worked in Virginia's fire service as a career since 1996. And prior to that, volunteered for about 3 years. I started in 1993 with the Manassas Park Fire Department. And even prior to that, a year with the Virginia Tech Rescue Squad, which is where I got my EMT. And it was a lifetime. Almost 30 years in Virginia's fire service. And I lived there since 1979. I moved from Pennsylvania when I was 6 years old. And so it was a huge change, as you've pointed out. But, I believe that there's an alignment of things sometimes that just come together. You've heard it negatively referred to as the Swiss cheese theory, right? Where all of the holes line up and usually to describe risk, and you kind of shoot right through there and bad things happen. In this case, I think the alignment of the Swiss cheese really led me here. And, I've always had a little bit of a draw west, really since 2007, when me and 6 other fathers who all had kids with the same type of cancer decided to ride across the country from Sacramento to Washington, D.C. to raise money for Dr. Eugene Chung, who was a researcher at Memorial Sloan Kettering, who was doing a lot of really innovative things around the cancer that all our kids had. And obviously you can't cross the country without crossing the Continental Divide. And so we rode over Berthoud Pass in Colorado, overnighted in Denver with Denver Fire Department, and visited Children's Hospital of Denver at the time, which ironically is now located in the city of Aurora. And I think that really sparked my interest in the West. And particularly, I followed that up with an accreditation site visit to South Metro Fire Rescue. I believe it was 2021, and fell in love with the fire service culture. That was reinforced by my experience at the National Fire Academy and EFO with 4 colleagues who were from Colorado's fire service. And what I saw in their culture, what I saw in their personalities, what I saw from the standpoint of inclusion and passion and leadership competencies really just fanned the flame there. And when this opportunity came up, I just couldn't pass it up.
That's really interesting. So you gained some perspective through some challenges in your own personal life and through the National Fire Academy and through the accreditation model of doing site visits, which gave you an opportunity to travel a little bit and be exposed to other things. When you decided to take that transition and leave Virginia and come to a somewhat familiar place that you've passed through and you've done some work in, what was the unexpected? You had some perspective. You saw what could be possible in the fire service throughout the United States. But what was the thing that was most unexpected as a new fire chief coming from another state that most of your staff and fire department may have never even visited? What was unexpected about that transition?
So I knew that the city of Aurora had some challenges, and I think probably the thing that was most striking for me was the culture that I found in this fire department. And so when you think about departments that experience a lot of challenges, external influences or bad media coverage or, crazy trauma within the department, I think I would have expected a down culture, a culture that was unstable ground, planting your feet in sand. And what I found here, which was most surprising, that despite the external challenges that this department has faced, I found a rock solid culture, a culture of service, a culture of commitment to the community and to each other, a department where the members embrace all aspects of the job that we're privileged to do in a community. I mean, you think about what our role is in a community. I mean, we're community helpers. We get to spend an entire career in service of others, which I can't overstate the value and the gratitude that I have for that opportunity. And so coming here and finding that despite some of those external influences and the things that have happened throughout the years here, you can think of it as Century 21 theater shooting, an incredible amount of trauma that the department and its members experienced during that event, and a series of other things that have happened over the years, and media relationships and hypercritical analysis of departmental operations. You would expect to find people who were bitter. You would expect to find people who were disengaged. And what I have found is one of the best cultures in a fire department that I've seen. And you mentioned my ability to travel across the country and through CPSE and work with CPSE as a board director or as a peer assessor. The ride landed us, the cross country ride and fundraiser landed us at several fire departments across the nation, and then conferences and things like that. I've had the opportunity to peek behind the curtain in a lot of different departments. And so when I tell you that I've found one of the most remarkable, impressive cultures within this department, that this isn't the first department I've seen. And so I think it's critically important to mention that. And that was the thing. And I frequently tell the members of this organization that very thing, because it just warms my heart. I think that nothing is impossible when you start with a solid foundation of a sound culture and a culture of service, culture of inclusion, a culture of commitment to a community. There's nothing that we can't do.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And when we talk about culture in the fire service, that's a huge player to building that foundation. I think the other big culture that builds a foundation for a good fire chief is the culture at home. So moving your family from Virginia, leaving a son behind in college, and moving your daughter and wife to Colorado. How was that culture change? How was how did that work, and what maybe what would you have done differently, or what did you feel like that was a success in that process?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joe, because I think, we talk about this a lot in leadership circles here within my executive staff. We talk about the balance, right? And the importance of a healthy you, right? Bringing your whole self to work. And that means that you're, I describe the life in the fire service in particular as a bucket, right? You've got these drains at the bottom that allow you to maintain sort of a level equilibrium, if you will. And so as life just naturally sort of fills that bucket at the top, the fire service and the things that we see and the things that we have to engage also fill that bucket. And at the bottom, you've got these drains, right? You've got financial stability, you've got healthy relationships, you've got diet and sleep and exercise. And those things are the things that keep you balanced. And we start shutting off those stopcocks, and you close the drains, then you start to kind of fill up and run over. And so it really impacts your resiliency. And what you mentioned about that family dynamic, I think, is critically important. And it's something that, quite honestly, I stressed a lot about. My daughter's 14, and she was getting ready to head into high school. And so while some might argue that's a perfect time to make a transition like that, it's also a really fragile time for her. She's grown up with a bunch of friends. She's established a really healthy friend network and some what could be lifelong relationships if they're nurtured. And now I uproot her from that setting and move her 1,600 miles west to a state she's never been. Going to a brand new school with brand new kids that she's never met, and honestly hope and pray for stability and success in that move. By no doing of my own, the transition has been phenomenal. She has exceeded my expectations, and quite honestly has been the strongest person, the best one who's moved through this transition. While I think naturally, I have questions that I ask about, okay, is this the right move? Did I do this well? My wife obviously has questions. She sort of unplugged from a full-time career in nursing and shifted out here and is jumping through the series of hoops that's necessary to reestablish state licensure and all those different things in a new place. And all of my family was born and raised in Virginia. And so it was very disruptive. One of the things that I think was, but to answer your question, Joe, it's been so much more successful than I ever could have hoped. And I find myself, I don't know if you're a Brene Brown fan, but I enjoy her writing. And one of the things she discusses, which I think is particularly important in our industry, is the inability to lean into the joy. And because constantly in our service, we're reacting to really bad situations. And I think we're always waiting for, all right, what's going to happen now, right? And waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so I found myself having that conversation in my own head, which I know is dangerous, but about, like, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I'm struggling to lean into the joy because it's gone so smoothly with them. And, but I'm really optimistic. My son, as you mentioned, is back in North Carolina, finishing his final year of college. He's interested in coming out here, and he's visited a couple of times and loves it. I mean, the Denver metro area there's no athletic team that doesn't play sports here. And so he's a big sports nut and super excited about that transition, which is different than back home. One of the things that I think accidentally happened well was I started here 3 months before my family came. And because of that, I was living a little bit of a bachelor's life. There wasn't anything to go home to. And so the only family that I had in Colorado was my fire service family. And that meant that I had a lot of time to really connect personally and professionally with the department. And I told them frequently, like, you're the only family I have in Colorado. I believe the fire service is a family. You and I have had those conversations before. And it gave me an opportunity to meet so many members of the department and have conversations around the kitchen table and ask them questions, which were the questions that have really guided our plan moving forward. Like, what's going right? What's going wrong? What do I need to be paying close attention to? What do I need to keep my hands off of? And that last question, I think, is really important because I have the privilege to serve a department that's been around since 1902. And there's a ton of history and tradition here and things that the organization takes an incredible amount of pride in that I did not want to upset when I got here. And so that 3-month window of really connecting and relationship building with that transition out here, I think was critically important. And while I didn't intend that to happen, I would have brought my family, because that's a horrible time. I mean, this is the longest I've ever been separated from my family. It was challenging to stay connected with them and stay part of their life and their activities, particularly with a time difference. And so that was tough. But now I see the value in the ability to come out and really build those relationships early on with an intensity and an intentionality that I think has strengthened my ability to connect with the department and my ability to get things done with them.
So let's go back a little bit and talk about the family and the network that you used in order to make that successful. Because I know that I've heard you talk about the network that you had as a Metro Fire Chief and working with other spouses and having those relationships, early on and before, making that transition. Did that did that play a part in, a successful move from, your family moving from Virginia to Colorado?
Yeah, 100%, because it meant that I wasn't, and there's a combination of things. It was the relationships that had been built through the Metro Fire Chiefs Association. It was relationships that were built through the National Fire Academy and the Executive Fire Officer Program that made it feel more like home almost instantaneously. And so, the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs is a fantastic organization. It's an organization that includes the fire chiefs and our partners. And I think the organization recognizes the value of that piece, that key relationships and strong relationships will offer some resilience and a network of people who you can confide in. In the fire chief's position, you could say the higher you go in the organization, if you look at the organizational chart over my shoulder, it looks like a triangle, right? But I really believe that's inverted. And so, you promote to the fire chief's position, and now you're at this point at the bottom, really balancing and serving an entire organization. But it can be a lonely place when it comes to bouncing ideas off or being vulnerable or in conversations and in questions. And if you lack confidence in the direction or a decision, it can be a little bit of a challenge. And so that network is really, really powerful. And so I knew Desmond Fulton and Bob Baker and Don Lombardi and Randy Royal, all from the Metro Chiefs organization. And so, Denver, West Metro, South Metro, and Colorado Springs and Aurora are the 5 Metro departments in Colorado. And so I asked a lot of questions about the area, about the department, their perspective and their relationships and observing, what was going on in the region. And that was really helpful to get me on stable ground quickly. Bob Baker in particular is a fantastic human. He's the fire chief of South Metro Fire Rescue, and him and his wife, Denise, almost immediately wrapped their arms around us when we came to visit and start to search for housing and things like that, and made us feel at home and made us feel welcome. I think that's a big part of it too. You need to feel like you're coming into a community that is interested in your service and is welcoming you as a partner in emergency services. And so that was huge. It was a huge benefit for our entire family, and was really helpful in making the move a success.
So on your whiteboard behind you was an organizational chart. I thought that was a recipe for biscuits for Thanksgiving.
Sweet potato casserole, coming out of Thanksgiving. Yeah. Really, really important order of operations. So.
Yes. All right. So for the fire chiefs, or even the chief officers that are in organizations that are sitting on their couch at night, looking at potential opportunities, throughout the country, and considering making this move, what advice do you have that could help them be successful? What advice do you have in preparing to take that plunge to apply for a job in a state that they've never lived? What's that advice look like?
So there's a couple things. I think you've got to have a desire to live where you're going, and so it made the transition here more of an adventure than a work move, if that makes any sense, Joe. I think this is a beautiful area. This is a beautiful state. I know you and your family, frequent ski resorts out here. I'm an hour and a half, from Breckenridge, and, world-class skiing and recreation. So I think that really plays into it. It has to be an area that you're interested in living, because it makes it feel a little bit more like an adventure. I think that's for the entire family. And I think that's really important. I think you need to do your homework, as you look, you need to see, read headlines about the organization and prepare yourself to engage in the community relations components that are necessary and required. You need to connect if you've got people who know people in the department and can share some inside information about it. And none of that is to find an easy job. It's like a size up. You go into a house fire, you're doing a 360 of the organization, and before you deploy your hose lines, you need to know how big they need to be, how big the fire is, and what the building construction is like if you're on a solid foundation. And then you need to understand the operational culture, the political culture, the legal challenges that might be facing the organization, and the fiscal picture, right? The finances of the organization. If to the extent that you're able to assess the organizational culture, I think that's really important too, the people. But all of that is not to decide whether or not you're going in the fire. It's just to go in there prepared for what you're going to encounter. And I think the other piece is seeing how that aligns with what you perceive in your own self-assessment as your strengths and your weaknesses. The piece that I would emphasize for somebody who's moving to a new position like this is authenticity. And, we went through a pretty rigorous interview process to the candidates for this job. And I was not stressed out about it. And the reason that I was not stressed out about it is because I know who I am, and I knew that I would enter those interviews being authentic and vulnerable. I think I've got strengths in some areas and weaknesses in others, and I'm happy to share that with an organization who's considering me for the fire chief's job, because what I don't want to be is somebody else. And so what I found here when I came out for the interview process, and I told my wife this, I found a department that really needed somebody to care about them, needed humanity to come back in organizational decisions and training and discipline. They needed a fire chief who cared. And so I believed in my heart that was a strength that I could bring, and that I wouldn't have to act in that capacity, that it would just kind of flow naturally from the conversations. It was part of my DNA, And so in my heart, I felt like I would be a good fit here, that I would be able to accomplish a lot of the things that the organization needed. And, with collaboration with the workforce, with collaboration with the local, collaboration with the leadership team that exists here, bring that group together and move the organization forward. And so I think authenticity is critically important. And I think humble assessments of your own capabilities is a really critical component of that too. If you're not honest with yourself, you can't be honest with anybody else. And I think that critical self-assessment and, in a plan to kind of fill in where you feel like you need to shore some things up is really important going into that. And I think that interviewers, and I can speak for me, having done quite a few interviews, that I'm looking for authenticity. And I'm looking for somebody who humbly accepts that they're imperfect and that they have room for growth, but also recognizes areas where they can be a contributor to an organization or to a team or to a relationship. And so I think that's a really important key role going into those interviews, honest and authentic and somewhat vulnerable.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Any final thoughts before we close out?
No, Joe, I think that this is, I think it can be really exciting. It can be a really exciting adventure. Leadership in any department is not easy, and you should be prepared to roll up your sleeves and really get to work. But I think it's critically important when you go into a new fire service family that, the old adage that you have 2 ears in one mouth, and you spend a lot of time connecting and starting to understand the leadership culture, the operational culture, the humans that are behind the work, right? This is a human-centered industry, right? We without people to do the work, healthy, resilient people who you care for to go out and do that work, we won't be successful. We can't be successful. So I think going in and really listening to the organization's needs, you have brilliant people that work in the fire service, and spending the time putting aside your bias, putting aside your, snap of judgment, your rapid 360, that says this is the way we're going to approach this, and being collaborative and listening and valuing other people's opinions, respecting them as professionals in the industry, and incorporating their ideas and their hopes and dreams into your plan for the organization, I think is essential for success. And so, I'd encourage anybody who's really interested in caring for a workforce and caring for a community, that it's not impossible, and that you can do it. Go in with your eyes wide open and do your due diligence, and then be prepared to roll up your sleeves and get to work.
It's great advice. Chief, thank you for joining us on our podcast.
Joe, thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate what you're doing for the fire service. I hope that some tidbit of this was helpful for somebody out there and who's looking to embark on a new adventure. And I appreciate your time. And
we made it through a podcast without Tom Jenkins.
We survived.
We absolutely survived. Today we were talking to Chief Alec Oughton from Aurora Fire Rescue in Colorado. We talked a lot about understanding and gaining some perspective before considering to take the plunge and moving a career and a family across the United States. Understanding that making sure that the culture in the fire service or in the fire department is good, but also making sure your culture at home and having those good relationships to help your partner and your children make that move. It was some good information that we talked about today. I think a really good tie back into the fire service was doing that good size up, right? Chief Oughton talked about doing a size up of the organization and understanding what you're walking into and making sure that you clearly want to live where you work. But I think first and foremost, you've got to be authentic in the process. You need to understand that it is you that is going to be the fire chief, and it is you that's going to take that position. And through that interview process, through the building relationships in your new community, be yourself, because that is who you are. To our listeners out there, subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to your podcasts. Leave a rating. Let us know how well we did, and tell us that you enjoyed the content. If you can, recommend us to a friend. Let other people know about the iCHIEFS podcast. And thank you for joining us today. I hope you learned something new, and be safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.